you're up, unless.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
I
All right,
think
it's
it's
all yours.
I think it's funny because we have the same PowerPoint basic design. Okay, should be good. So hello everyone. I am Hayal, and today I will speak about how to design good choices in visual novel games. By good, I mean engaging, like the kind of choices your player will remember after they finish to play your game. First, we will go through common mistakes, and I will give general advice to avoid it. And then we will speak about how to choose the best type of choice for what you need. Because obviously, I am speaking of generality, and every project is different. And there is some case where what I say doesn't apply. So just take everything with a grain of salt. Um, Before we start, I can. Um, no. Okay, so that worked. So just I'm going to take a lot of example in my talk. These are fairly old games, but I still thought it was interesting to do spoiler warning. So here we are. Okay, so before we go through the different advice, there is four raw different type of choices. They can be mix match as we wish, but basically there is the branching choice where a choice will lead to a totally different scene or chapter in your story. The flavor line choice where your choice will just lead to one or two lines different. The point-based choice where your choice will rise or down some hidden or showed variable. And the time choice where you have a limited amount of time to pick what you will choose. And when I say it can be mixed match, is because a branching choice can also give a new point, for example. So here we are. So first, something which is important is to make sure your player understands the choice they make, because it's very frustrating to pick an option and to then realize it was far more aggressive or flirty than you imagine when you picked it. Because you think that as a player, you think that if you add all the information, you would have made different choices. I think on this regard, Dragon Age Inquisition made a very good choice by adding this little line that clarify what you are going to do exactly, what are the consequences of these choices that can be just in one line. And on the other hand, Arcadia of Land had a really good tone indication that really helps well, getting the tone of the line and then avoiding this kind of aggressive lines you didn't expect to be. On the other hand, I love Cinderella phenomenon like truly, but I really didn't like the first choice of the game because it was like go left, go right. Okay, you have no context. Um, it's kinda an important choices because you will get a CG of your love interest and on an otome game like Cinderella phenomenon, it's a point to get them like it's important. And so it was very frustrating because I didn't add any information to help me take my decision. So sometimes adding a little information before, like what could I expect in the left or in the right, can help the player to make they feel like they didn't just randomly pick something to advance in the story, but made a choice. Two, it's very important that some of your choices matter. I insist on the sum because you can make choice who are just here to add a little flavor to your story. But if every of your choices doesn't matter, it means the player will finish the game and say, okay, was the point of all these choices since none of them matters? Like I didn't have any impact in the story in the end. So it can be also frustrating for it. And so it's important that I have choices that matter. But matter doesn't mean changing the whole story or the whole world. It can be small things. It's more the idea that a specific decision has specific consequences. It's more easy to do it for branching choices because you can have a completely different scene, but a few tips for flavoline choices and point-based choices. So for flavoline, something which is good is to just remember what the players say. Like for example, the player choose his favorite drink. So he said bubble tea, and you have a few flavor line about the characters saying, yeah, I love bubble tea too, or I didn't like it, or I never tested. And then later in the game, one of the character offers him a bubble tea because he picks this option earlier. And it's a little thing, it doesn't have huge meaning, but it still makes my previous choice matter. The characters remembered it, and I love the character, so I'm glad I did this choice. And for the point-based choices, the thing which is very, very important is to make sure the point who are raised or down makes sense with the choice which is made. Like sometimes they are shown on the street, like you have a little indicator telling you won or lost point. Sometimes they are not. But retrospectively, it's important the player feels like, oh, like it can think back about it and saying, oh yeah, that choice I made, I'm sure it gives me some points about on it. That's something I'm really trying hard to do for my own game, Imperial Grace. You have lots of possibility for the ending. It's like more like an epilogue. And one of these is empowering women in the society. So I make sure that every of the choices that can up or down this variable are clearly about empowering women or not in the society. So like when the player get or not this special ending, he knows why he got it. And that's very important. Then the very something that works really well is to have great choice. Great choice. So there are no best outcome. You can make a bad or a good ending with great choices. Otherwise, they are not great choice. If you are as a writer or creator, if you decided that this was a good choice to pick, it can't work because the player will feel it or will be angry to be punished to have choices, something that seems legitimate. There is three types of great choice. First is a personal conviction one. It's when it's just different vision of the world that are clashing with each other. I think that in Dragon Age Inquisition, the divine was really interesting. So the divine is like the Pope, it's of the religion. So it will lead the religion, and you have three different characters with three different vision of what should be this religion, and will have a huge impact of the world. And something I love about this choice is how I see people on the internet arguing about which is the best divine and never agreeing on anything because it's a personal opinion. There is no wrong or right choice or best choice. It just depends on what you believe. And doing choices like that are odd but very rewarding for the player because they really feel like they can shape their experience. Then there is a personal versus moral dilemma. In Fable 2, you get a dog at the beginning of the story. Your dog is with you during all the story, and then he dies. And then at the end of the story, you can choose between saving 1,000 of lives of people you don't know and saving your dog. I loved my dog so much. I didn't care about the 1,000 of characters, but my morality says I have to save 1,000 of people I don't know. But as a player, not even as a character, as a player, I loved my dog. So this choice is actually very, very hard. And it doesn't even always have to be a life or death situation. I mean, still in Dragon Age, because I am in love with Dragon Age and everyone know anyway. In the first one, in Dragon Age Origin, there is a choice I never can make because it means breaking up with my romance, Alistair, and I can't. Like, I love this 2D character. I can't break him with him, even if it's in a game. So at this moment, you make a very personal feeling choice, and it's really interesting as a player to do it. And first, and then the last great type of great choice existing is the lesser evil dilemma. Like, whatever you do, it's going to be dark. There will be bad consequences, and there is good in it. So it's really just picking what is the less worth of it. So, for example, Stormbreaker is full of the lesser evil dilemma, and there is this one time where you have to choose between saving or not an elf who is accusing of being a spy, but there is practically no evidence and a clear racism. So your morality tells you it's better to help the elf, but your goal in the story is to advance, to get back in your kingdom and to be a powerful queen. So you don't want to anger the villager. And whatever you do, there will be bad consequences. The villager can be angry, or the elf will betray you in the end, or the elf will be angry. Like, there is no good way around. And you just have to pick in the end what was less worth for you. Um, I think a good measure to know if you designed a great choice is to just see how people deal with them with the walkthrough. Like, when you have a walkthrough and you're still hesitating on what you should do, you got a great choice. One thing about great choice is important to remember that they can be stressful. Like, a player can take real 5 minutes to ponder the decision because it feels important to them, because there is no right or wrong answer. So it can be very overwhelming for a player if there is a lot of them in a story. Like, every 5 minutes you have a life and death situation to deal with. It can lead to the contrary of what you want. Instead of having a player invested in a story, he will just back off because it's too much for him to deal with all those choices, and he will like not be invest in the story. So I think it's important to space out with either with having more flavor line choices, or with having more just time between them, like a good hour of reading between the next choice, for example. Then design interesting bad ending. Like, I don't say you can't have a good or a bad ending, but when you do, you have to make sure of two things. First, that the players somehow knows he's going in the wrong way. Like, he doesn't have to be super clear about it, but give hints so the player doesn't feel betrayed to make the bad choices. And then you have to make sure that your bad ending is interesting to actually read. Like, that a player who is not a completionist would want to see it just by curiosity, for example. But there is 3 ways to do that. First is being informative. Like, I really like in Mad Marion how you get hints about what is going to happen in your bad endings or game over, or just piece of lore you wouldn't get otherwise. They can be funny. Fashioning Little Miss Lonesome just make me cracked up every time. Every bad ending was just priceless and worth seeing just because I know I would love. Or atmospheric, like in Changeling, you have this creepy old lady, and every character's told you don't speak with her. And there was part of me that wanted to know what would happen if I do speak with her, and I wasn't disappointed. And so, yeah, that's some way to deal with it. 5, don't pretend an important choice matter if it doesn't. So as I said, all of your choice doesn't have to matter, but there is some choice who feels important to the player, like typically a life or death situation will always feel important to the player. So when designing a choice that feel important, it's important that this choice is actually matter and have um, and have consequences in your story. I have two counter example of this. First, in Yes, you're right. You have this choice where you can marry your daughter in exchange for an army that you need. And it was a very hard choice for me. But in the end, I decided, no, I won't marry my daughter against her will. I don't care if I get a bad ending. I won't. But my character have someone telling me, yeah, you know, you can't afford it. We have to defend the kingdom. And he said, yeah, you're right. And he marries his daughter anyway. And I was like, this is my choice. You made me choose. Why do you cancel my choice just right after? And it's very frustrating, and you feel betrayed as a player. And another example of that is very similar. Is in Game of Thrones, Telltale. Uh, you have this moment where you can defend your sister honor, and if you do that, you die. So I was like, I don't want to die. So I reload my game, and I did another choice where I do nothing, and I still die. And then that's how I realized that this choice I thought was important was actually doesn't matter, because the outcome just after the choice is similar, and the player feels betrayed, because why do you put a choice here? Why do you make me take time to ponder it if you will cancel just after it? Just to clarify, matter doesn't mean it have to change the ending of the game. If a character is meant to die, it's okay. But if it dies just right after anyway, or if it dies 4 chapter after, it doesn't have the same weight. Like you still had the pleasure to get this character 4 more chapter, for example, or the displeasure if it's a villain, for example. But yeah, it have to have, if it's an important choice, it have to have important consequences. Otherwise, the player will just feel betrayed. This Telltale really had a lot of storm shit going on about this choice doesn't really matter thing. I don't think I have time to read it out loud there, but I really saw this article about choices in Telltale games by Andy Kelly was interesting, because it really shows what I'm trying to tell you about why it's important to not lie to your player. If a choice doesn't matter, it's okay. They doesn't all have to be game breaking, but you don't pretend it is if it isn't. And now, what is the best type of choice for my game? Well, of course, it depends on the type of game you want. If you want a dark grim story, great choice are the way to go. If you want a casual, cute life story, flavor lines are actually a very good way to go. So I'm just going to go over pro and cons of each type of choices. So first, branching choice will require heavy writing. So it's really something to consider in terms of scope of your story, but they add a lot of replayability, and the consequences are easily shown to the player. So it's very interesting to have some of them. A flavor line choice are very good for role playing. Typically, if you want a blank stage protagonist, having a lot of flavor line choice is more doable because they require less writing. So you can make a lot of them and have this sense of I am doing my own story. A point-based choice require a good follow-up. Like you actually have to do some math and calculate how much point you can have in maximum and minimum to know which ending you will get. But they have a very good thing is that they help focus the big consequences near the end of the story. Like you can have a character dying because of a point-based choice, and you won't have to deal with this character being alive or not during all the story, because you can just make that at some point of the story, preferably toward the end for the scope of it. This all those choice you did somehow make sense suddenly into these consequences, and you have to deal with it now. Uh, for the time choice, they create a sense of emergency and a sense of gameplay. Like a lot of people doesn't consider visual novel like games. Obviously, I disagree with them, but I don't have experience to prove my point. But I feel like time-based choice help people feel like there is more interactivity. But it also means it breaks the casual mood VN player can have when they play like comfy on their bed without a mouse or something. It creates a sense of emergency that is not always fitting a mood when you go into a visual novel. So I think it's important to warn the player beforehand, hey, you got to have a time choice now. Also be careful because everybody have different reading speed. It's particularly true in English. Like English isn't my first language, and I think a lot of players who read visual novel in English are not their first language, so necessarily they have a lower reading speed, and sometimes they need to check a word on the dictionary or something. So yeah, you have to be careful about that. And finally, I would say don't hesitate to mix match. Like if you only do one type of choice every time, the player gets used to it and it creates some kind of sense of redundancy. So having like a lot of flavor line choice and suddenly a branching choice, it can break this redundancy. And big games like Dragon Age, which as I said, I love tremendously, do that a lot. Like there is flavor line choice where you can just pick your energy, like will I be an asshole or will I be nice or will I be funny? And there is a lot of branching choice where you actually change the story during one or two chapter because you made this choice. And poise matches like the divan typically is a point based choice based on other choices you made, who was flavor line, who was branching, and that's how you create a full experience that the player will remember. And that's all. I think I'm done. I hope I was clear. And if you have questions, I will listen them.
All right. Thank you. All right, we have time for questions. I see one. Keep everyone else start writing a question. So the first question is, does the results of a choice need to be immediately following the choice itself, or can it be somewhat later?
Uh, yeah, it can be somewhat later and really later. I think, like I said, the best is to have some of your choice having immediate consequences. So the players start the story and say, okay, here in this game, my choice matter. Because the thing is, a lot of games say their choice matter, but it's not really always true. So I think it's stupid, but having your first choice having immediate consequences shows the player in which kind of game he is, and then you can have an early choice in the game having bad consequences in really later on the game. It's not a problem as long as what I say for the point-based choice, the player can make a link between it, and the far away it is, the more difficult it is for the player to make the connection. So don't hesitate when you have the consequences to remind the player, like, you thought you killed me this time where you let me go on the under the train, but no, I survived. So the player know that, yes, because I let the villain die to the train, that I have these consequences right now. And yeah, just make the link between your choice, your consequences, if it's very, very later into the game.
All right. And so there's a question. Uh, someone's writing a VN with one ending but different choices throughout the game to help shape it. What kind of choices would be good for a VN like that?
Flavor line choices I think are the best for, like, because you can't make or branching choice, but you can't make a VN who has just one ending but shaping the story. I actually recommend this particular person to read the article I mentioned earlier, because it really talk like the journalist says, actually, I realized I don't care. My choices in Telltale games didn't matter. What I liked was to be able to have a different sense of the story because the way I choose to play it. So if you have one ending, it's what you want to do with your player. Having a lot of flavor line choice or some branching choice that would make the player feel his experience was still unique, even if the ending is the same. And make sure that a few of your flavor line choices have an actual payback later. Even if it's inside the story and not the ending, it's perfectly fine.
Cool. All right. One person asked, can choices be stuff like what color do you prefer? And then the choice isn't impactful to the story, but you get to know the player.
I'm sorry. Like the choice seems not important, but it actually is important. That is the question.
Or they're saying that the question is like, it's like they're asking, what color do you like? And then it's not very impactful, doesn't really change the story, but you get to know the player. Maybe, maybe it changes some conversation, but like it doesn't like change like how the plot moves.
Oh, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Like I said, every choice doesn't have to have huge consequences. I mean, you ask the player what his favorite color is, and then you offer his sweater with his favorite color. He will remember, he will know it's because he choose this color, and that's what is important. And as I say, if it's one choice among many, it's okay that this particular choices didn't get any result in the story as long as other choices have an impact. But it's not, like I said, mattering doesn't mean changing the whole story or the world around or die of the character. It can just be small things. And it can also be a way for a character to know the other characters better, like what is your favorite color? Red, and a character replying, oh yes, me too, but that's because I love love, I love passion, that's why red is my favorite color. And then this choice was just a flavor line choice, but you learned something new about a character. He was not just an idle choice that had no consequence whatsoever.
Great. Okay, we are at time. Any more questions? Just go into chat and just enjoy chat there. Meanwhile, Tim, you're up. I'm gonna go paste this last question into the other chat.
Bye bye.
Thank you.